Well, welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. This is Narcissist Trash Talk. This particular video was inspired by a viewer's comment. She stated,
I think it's they don't give us real closure, and the cognitive dissonance causes us to keep rehashing it over and over.
bingo! Yes, this is a discussion about closure, or lack thereof closure, which I've covered a few times before, but I figured I would cover it again from a different angle, because it really is true, and plus I've come across some other information which ties right into it. If you have been involved with a cluster B toxic monster person, narcissistic, anything related to psychopath, sociopath, and so on, a common occurrence is when it's over with, or when you've been discarded, there is not a feeling of closure. You sometimes feel like you're just left hanging, like you've invested this time and this energy and this effort with this person, and maybe even overstepped some of your own boundaries to accommodate this person, thinking that, okay, well, this person's so nice, it's worth it, and then it vanishes, and you're left there naked, hanging in the air. Well, that's normal for you if you are a genuine human being. You see, another narcissist, another monster, probably wouldn't care if they went through what you went through, but because you're different from these creatures, it's common for you to be seeking, or at least a rational ending to this thing. I mean, come on, the person swooped in, took over, was there for your every need right off the bat, didn't question anything. After a while, just zoom, vanished away. Like we discussed in the previous video, that was the viewer question about why do I continue to dream about the creature, which I'd mentioned because it's not real. It doesn't feel real for you to have been taken through such extremes of being extremely adored and then being extremely ignored. It just doesn't really fit any normal timeline. Well, if you're a genuine person who, for example, goes out on your first date and is simply yourself and tries to reveal as much of yourself as realistically possible, well, you are completely the opposite of this narcissistic creature. That alone is a clue that you are based in reality. The other person, the toxic cluster B monster, clearly isn't. So that's very important to keep in mind when it comes to the subject of closure, because more than likely you were taken in by some kind of toxic creature. You altered your life to fit around this person, probably got to the point of being actually comfortable with this person, and as I said before, stepped over some of your own boundaries, and then realized what's all for the better, and you felt so secure and happy temporarily. Well, when the creature wakes up one day and just decides, oh, I'm leaving, and they run off and do whatever they do, that is not something we're prepared to go through. It's just not following any logical pattern. To compare would be a slow romance you develop with, let's say, your classmate. You study together. You think she's pretty. You don't make moves on her because you think she has a boyfriend. You can't help but feel closer to her with each time. She starts to reciprocate those types of feelings, and a slow budding thing occurs. You take it to the next level and you make love to her, and she decides that's not what she wants to do, tells you she can't do it anymore. She slowly distances herself away from you and explains why, and you are sad but at the same time understand, well, that would be like a normal interaction because it went through its stages and phases of natural, organic progression, not someone who shows up at your door on day one and on day two has a wedding ring for you. So keep in mind, you're not dealing with somebody with a full deck of cards. And more than likely, you've been targeted because you do have a full deck of cards. You're the perfect challenge for these creatures because they are not real people, but they know that you are. So, when it comes to closure, what many times happens is your little thing runs its course, and then it announces some kind of crazy, strange news where it's telling you that things are going to be different now. I'm going elsewhere. For you, you're thinking you're with a genuine person, and you're like thinking you can appeal to them, saying, wait a second, hang on, you can't just be doing this. And they will be like a different person at this point. Naturally, if you're a rational person, in reality, you are going to be like demanding answers. Like, wait a second, you can't just swoop into my life and take over and then vanish. Come on. And you will try, and they will act as if you are harassing them, when really you're just trying to make sense of a nonsensical situation. Which, of course, this ties in with the new partner. They can point to you and say, look how crazy he is. He can't let go. I don't want him. He wants me. And you'll look exactly like that, when even though you may just be trying to be like the regular example I gave and think, okay, I understand we went through this progression and that progression, but let's reflect back and forth. You won't get that with these creatures. They're not capable. And as far as another reason you won't get any kind of closure from the creature, well, it's the same principle that applies when you're being manipulated and crazy made with this person and you try to approach them about that. Well, where has that gotten you? So it's like the same all around. These people are not capable of actually having a regular human relationship that's equal. They've pretended to be what they thought you wanted, but the whole time were covering up the real self, which was an evil, selfish monster. Well, so as far as the closure, if you're someone who's rational and in reality, and you're trying to sit them down and say, but wait a second, I just need to understand, how could this be? You will not get anywhere. And if you've tried and you don't get anywhere, it's a clue. You're dealing with a toxic monster. You have to take a look at what you're dealing with. This is a subhuman creature. It's not a fully developed person who learned throughout their lives that sometimes they have to lose out, other times they win and it's great, and they'll try harder next time if they lose. Well, none of that exists with these people. They basically see themselves as an outsider. So when they came into your life and love bombed you and did all that stuff, in the back of their mind, they knew that if you knew what they were, you would not even be sitting there with them at the moment. So to them, it's like a thrill, like they're getting away with something forbidden. So what this means is, if you were to sit them down and say, hey, look, I understand we're over, but I need to understand, you will not get any kind of satisfaction because, remember, this is an outsider. You are the real person that was targeted because of that, probably. You are trying to get this creature to appeal to you or speak to you in the same type of language or viewpoint of a person who has rational, logical sense. And that's not what you're dealing with. So that explains the retarded type excuses you get when, for example, the man had sworn to you that since he's met you, he doesn't even think of other women, but then you find out about 6 that he made love to behind your back, and then you're like trying to reconcile that, like, wait a second, you're not interested in ladies, and then you get something like, well, it's your fault, you went out of town, it's your fault because you didn't pay attention to me. Whatever they say is sick. It's phony. So you have to accept that any closure you plan to achieve is going to have to be done independently, away from the creature, because they're not going to help you with that. Because they're not a fully developed human being, the truth here is, if this person was to sit you down and do what you're asking and explain all of the inconsistent behaviors, all of the actions that didn't go with the words, how all of your arguments fit to explain it all, yet you're told that your arguments are wrong, that this person didn't do that because of what you said, they did it because of some other sickening reason. If this person was to actually come clean and tell you the motivations for all the different discrepancies, all the inconsistencies, and so on, it would reveal what kind of monster it actually is. And that's one thing they don't want to reveal. One reason may be simply just in case they need to use you for supply later, and they know that you may have particular viewpoints on how a person should be or moral standards, and then for them to tell you that's how they are as far as being rotten to the core evil, they know that risks you thinking, oh, I'm in the wrong place, and then they may not be able to get supply from you in the future if it's needed. So they want to keep this hidden with their shame-based personality, so they won't have any rational discussions to give. They might tell you something they heard somebody else say once, but it's like taken out of context. It doesn't fit the situation, which leaves you with more and more questions. But if they were to reveal their real motivations, such as, I'm hooked on supply, I really liked seeing you and you seemed to like me, so I pretended to be your boyfriend so you'd see me regularly, but there were 3 girls down the street that I really liked, and I wanted to get into their rooms too and take their clothes off and da-da-da, and I couldn't tell you this, and the stuff like that. If you were to hear all that, you would think, oh, you were disgusting, never mind. If somebody wants to be like that, that's fine. But for them to be like that and also be pretending to be some old-fashioned, traditional, romantic thing for you, while doing that, it's just like, wrong. No. And because you're real, you can detect all this, but because they're not real, they think it's perfectly fine to conceal a secret identity where they have 3 other ladies behind your back and then want to be with you too, but you're not supposed to ask questions about that. And it's like, what twisted reality are they in? Well, we'll never know the answer, probably. But that's just a word on closure. Additionally, just an observation I've made to hopefully put into perspective a little bit more how twisted this creature is. I was going to share just a regular example to compare to the narcissistic cluster B monster. The cluster B monster, if you want to look at it, stepping away from it all and just looking in from the outside, if you were to sum up their behavior, you could very easily sum it up as a person who stepped into another person's life and did things to that person which deliberately created problems. And then, of course, the person who has been given these problems reacts in some way, and then the narcissist monster focuses on that reaction to justify how that other person was abusing him or her. That alone is totally sick and twisted, but that's the way they operate. And the way I think about this is in my own life. When I was a child, I had a dog. His name was Rusty. He was a stray that was the cutest little thing ever, and we just took him in. He also had an evil streak to him, and I learned how to manipulate it. And I used to poke at his little whiskers, and I used to say something to him. I thought it was funny that his little lips would curl up, and he would be ready to attack when I'd poke at him. He had these moles with hair coming out, so I'd say, little mole, and I'd poke at it, and he'd open his eyes big, and what I would do is try to develop a talent of poking at him, and then he would eventually bark and bite. I was a kid playing with a dog, and I knew that he bites because I'd been bitten before, so it was kind of like a challenge with the dog. When I would do this, sometimes I would not judge the time or whatever correctly, and I'd end up getting bitten. Now, it wasn't any deadly bite, but the dog bit. Well, I was mature enough to know that I was playing a game with the dog and that I do risk getting bitten. Prided myself on all the times I jerked my hand away just in time to miss the bite. Well, sometimes I was not so successful, and my hand ended up getting a chunk taken out of it. Well, do you think I then attacked and screamed at the dog? No, because that's what happens, is the way it seemed. For me, it's like, well, I was poking at the dog and he bit. What do you expect? So that's like a healthy circumstance. Well, when you think about the narcissistic monster, you are that dog that they are poking at. When you snap back at them, finally, they are going to instead punish you. And that's what shows you another example of how sickening these people are. because they don't even realize or calculate in their brain that maybe the reason they've been bitten is because they're poking at the dog like I was. So, no, they think that they're entitled to poke at that dog, and if that dog dares to bite them, they're going to punish it further. And with something like that, you can't expect to get any kind of closure that's going to make any sense for you because they're not operating with the full deck of cards. So hopefully this type of example can show you just how sickening they are on other levels and maybe make more sense as to why you can never get that closure, because it's like you're trying to demand them to give you a rational explanation that makes sense so you can walk away with dignity and happiness. It doesn't happen. They're not capable. They are retarded.
Hi, I am the narcopath.
And I wear a mask. Look, I know I agreed to give these confessions, so I wouldn't be fair if I didn't cover some of the other stuff that went on. I remember how you introduced me to all of your friends, and how I just instantly became friends with all of them before it was all over. I noticed some frustration in you. The truth is, I was working your friends from the beginning. I assessed carefully each and every one as far as who I could probably influence and who I probably couldn't. So you'll notice the ones that I could influence were the ones that turned their backs on you. I didn't only give you that thing you call love bombing. I did it to all your friends too, and they all loved me. The fact was, I think I was closer to some of them than you were actually, because I just know what I'm doing. Well, then it shouldn't come as any surprise after you started to figure out the kind of things I was doing and started telling your friends. Well, honey, I beat you to all that. Long before that happened, I went to them and I told them I thought you were paranoid, that you were suspecting anyone and everyone of being someone I was with, and all I wanted to be with was with you. And of course they were gullible and they bought it. So, once you found out what I did, and you ran to them, well, to be quite frank, you looked like a paranoid mess. And I orchestrated it that way on purpose. Notice how your friend didn't want to talk to you much anymore. I do have talent. Don't take it too hard. But that's just the way things go.